Hello, welcome to Podfic Galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Grossgasteiger. I read out loud fanfictions for you busy bees, free of charge and no strings attached. Today, I will continue reading the Silmarillion / Lord of the Rings fic by Bloodwing Blackbird from Archive of Our Own, called And Now Each Night I Count the Stars. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available to me. Note, this fic is rated explicit. On with the show! And now each night I count the stars. Chapter 13. The days were growing short when Halbarad set out for Rivendell. Almiron and Haleth saw him on his way, reassuring him with no little amusement that his brief absence would surely not bring disaster upon the land of the halflings, nor on the ranges of the north. He had travelled the road between the Shire and the last bridge enough times that it felt as much like home to him as anywhere ever had. There were 1,000 different paths through the wild that would deliver him to the same destination if he wished to avoid the eyes of fellow travelers, and these too were almost as familiar to him as the road itself, but he eschewed them this time, for it was a fellow traveler that he yearned to meet. The road was empty of travelling minstrels, of bright-eyed magpies out to steal trophies from him, though, the nights cold and silent and forlorn. It felt strange to cross the last bridge without a companion, for though Rivendell too had become a familiar destination, he had never travelled there alone, always as a guest of Aragorn, or, more recently, escorting Maglor. He had a fear, like the foolish one, that he would not be able to find the way without someone who had at least a whiff of immortality about them. His fear proved unfounded, for the path through the forest did not hide itself at his approach, and his senses did not become muddled by elven magic. The ground was soft with spruce needles beneath his feet, and the air was fresh with their fragrance. As he began to descend into the valley on the eve of midwinter, a wind stirred the pines with a sound like the sea, and he heard a faint echo of song amongst the trees. His heart stirred, for it was a lovely night, but also for the one whom he hoped to find awaiting him. He was welcomed to Rivendell by a rider, a lady upon a dappled mare, her face glowing lovely and sad as the moon. He had seen Arwen before, her orbit far away from his, as untouchable as the rarefied vapors that held the stars, not close, smiling warm from back of a horse, and greeting him like an old friend. Halbarad Dunedain? He dismounted, as graceful as a waterfall. It is you! What an unlooked-for pleasure! I did not think to see one of your kindred on this fair night. Halbarad bowed as gracefully as he was able to over her proffered hand, self-conscious of the dirt of the road that clung to him. My thanks, lady. Forgive me. I have heard so much about you that I forget that we have not truly met. I am Arwen, daughter of Elrond, and I shudder to think what you might heard about me. Halbarad could feel the warmth rising in his cheeks as relief crested into embarrassment and washed away the cold fear that had soaked into his bones with every day that passed with no word from Maglor. Please, don't believe anything that he corrected himself, Maglor says of me. Arwen laughed. Very well, then. If we are discounting the words or lovers, then I may believe what Aragorn says of you, and you may believe what Maglor says of me. He looked behind him, casting her eyes along the path, her smile fading. Is the son of Fëanor not with you, Halbarad? He almost turned, as if he was unsure, as if his mortal vision would discover something that Arwen could not see. I was to meet him here. He sent a letter saying that he would be delayed, but that he would be here on midwinter. Arwen's lips tightened, and Halbarad tucked his cloak close. Arwen was speaking, but it was hard to make himself hear her words over his heartbeat in his ears. I have not seen him since his visit on last midwinter. When did he set out? I do not know, he swallowed. I have not seen him since he departed for the land of Lothlorien this summer past. Arwen's eyes widened. Come with me. My father will wish to hear this news. Halbarad followed behind her as singing rose again in the valley, and the stars shone almost bright enough to cast shadows upon the ground. Elrond was found in his chambers, richly attired, as if for a feast. Belatedly, Halbarad noticed that Arwen too was richly dressed in silks, with a cap of netted pearls and he felt foolish for the part of his mind that had simply taken that for a part of her daily attire. He wondered if she made a habit of riding out thus to greet guests. Regardless, it seemed that Halbarad had arrived in time to deliver ill news on a joyous occasion. "Father," Arwen said when Elrond noticed their arrival, "I present Halbarad, son of Halbaran. He bears news that you should hear." Elrond raised an eyebrow. "Very well, Dunedain. What news do you bring?" Halbarad swallowed back his fear and spoke. "Truly, I did not know that I brought news of any sort until I arrived. Have you had no message from Maglar?" "I have not. When we heard news of your approach, I assumed that he would be with you. My daughter wanted to ride out to greet you both." Halbarad glanced at Arwen. "No, the last time that I saw him was ere midsummer. I have had a letter from him since, but nothing more." Elrond's brow furrowed. "Have you the letter?" Halbarad did. He kept it close to his heart. The parchment was soft and creased from much handling, and he would have felt strange about someone else seeing that, had the circumstances been otherwise. He pulled it from his pocket and passed it to Elrond. Worry flickered across Elrond's face as he read the messages, and Halbarad could see, clear as day, the moment that he had tried and failed to put the worry aside. "I know nothing of this errand the letter speaks of. Indeed, I have not heard any word from Saruman since our last council was convened." He rubbed at the bridge of his nose, thoughtful. "Regardless, it is still the night of midwinter, and it is a long journey from Isengard. A day or two delay is not unreasonable, especially with the nature of winter travel and the mountain crossing. Perhaps we should not fret quite so soon." Halbarad heard those words, but he also saw the glance that passed between Arwen and her father. "My daughter, we have guests waiting. Would you bid them begin?" With another glance at Halbarad, Arwen bent her head and left them. "You're worried," said Halbarad, "aren't you?" Perhaps it was not wise to speak so plainly to the Lord of Rivendell, but he had no patience for courtesy. Not now. "I am. You are as well, are you not?" He took a seat and filled a glass of wine for both of them and passed the letter back to Halbarad. "The rest of what is in that is between you and Maglor. I believe when I say that I'll ask no questions you may not wish to answer, since I, empathetically, do not wish to know more of it than I must." Halbarad tucked the letter safely away, oddly comforted. "Thank you. Tell me, Halbarad, have you the sight?" Halbarad set down his pack and considered his answer, accepted the glass of wine and taken a seat. "It seems I have a measure of foresight, yes." "I thought so. I know that many think otherwise, but I do not suffer from that particular affliction," said Elrond, his lips twisting into an expression that almost gutted Halbarad with its familiarity. No one would have said that he and Maklar looked so much alike, but it was there, hidden somehow. A bitter grimace, a mocking lift of the brow. Those expressions were gone now, his face smooth and grave as he asked, "Have you been fearful for a long time?" "I have. Ever since he set out for the woods. I thought that it was only—" He paused, not certain how much he wished to reveal to the Lord of Imladris. "Only what?" Elrond prompted. "Only that I would miss him," he said in a rush. The confession felt like a relief. "And I did. I do. But the feeling has not left me." "Halbarad," Elrond said, and Halbarad could hear the gentleness of one who was accustomed to delivering ill news. "This would not be the first time that Maglar has abandoned those who love him." Halbarad shook his head, the denial automatic. "Forgive me. I do not know everything that has passed between you, and I know that things are not easy between Maglar and his kin, but I do not believe that he would simply disappear. Not without a word." "Not without word to you, you mean?" The words almost had the ring of a challenge, but Halbarad stood firm. "Yes." Elrond studied him closely. "Well, you are steadfast, son of Halbaran." I hope that he is worthy of it. He is, Halbarad said, and hoped that he would be forgiven for the sharpness of his tongue. Elrond sighed. I spoke in haste. I do not doubt it. Not now. So, what shall we do? He pressed the tips of his fingers together beneath his chin in thought. Well, the first question is the simplest. We know that he left Lothlorien safely, but what then? In the morning I will send word to Isengard. Perhaps we can learn what this mysterious errand was, and if he is indeed overdue, or if it's simply a matter of message gone astray. Unsatisfying thought it may be, I think that there is a little more that we can do tonight. Elrond stood. You've had a long journey. Would you care for refreshments? We are feasting tonight and would be happy to welcome you. My apologies, Lord. I do not think that I could be a gracious guest this evening. Of course. I'll have a room prepared for you and food and drink sent up when you are ready. Please, though, let us speak again in the morning. Halbarad could not sleep that night, as if all of the disquiet that he had refused to entertain that fall had chosen that time to visit him. The people of the valley, too, were awake far into the night, for this night, longer than any other, was dedicated to the Kindler, and the songs rang out, mournful and joyful, all at once. Halbarad stood wakeful at his window, and hoped that somewhere his blackbird looked upon the same sky. In the morning he went to visit Elrond again. He did not show it the way Halbarad did, but he thought that he too bore the marks of a sleepless night. There was little more to say. Maglor had not appeared in the night. If Halbarad had been free to do so, he would have left for Isengard that very day, but his worry could not override his duty. If, as he suspected, Maglor had reached Isengard in the summer, the trail would already be long cold. In any case, Elrond had said that his sons would go, riding south to the Gap of Rohan, much faster than Halbarad could make the trip on foot, and covering much more ground. It seemed a futile hope, but if Maglor somehow chanced to miss Elladan and Elrohir, or did not choose to visit Rivendell, then he was likely to seek out Halbarad in the north. Halbarad had begged that any news be sent to him as quickly as it could be, and if it did not content him, and it did not comfort him, but that was where he had to leave it. News was slow in coming, far too slow to Halbarad's mind. He was restless, traveling his circuit among the guardians of the Shire in particular focus, almost hoping for trouble, which was nowhere to be found that spring. How he had wished for a distraction. He made the trip to Bree every other week, plaguing the innkeeper with his constant pleas for news. In February, he at last received a letter. Friend Halbarad, I write to you at the behest of my father. He has sent messages to Saruman the White, who confirms having requested the presence of Maglor, son of Feanor, for his assistance with documents believed to be supply manifests dating upon the union of Maedhros. Saruman says that Maglor did not arrive at Orthanc as requested, and that he has had no messages of explanation. If I may to speculate, he seemed surprised by my father's concern, and he professed himself unsurprised by Maglor's failure to appear. My father and I were greatly troubled by this answer. My brothers remain east of the mountains, where they continue to search for any sign of our friends' activities. I hope that you do not find it presumptuous for me to call him friend. We have spoken little, but it seems that he and I share much in common, and I treasure our brief conversation. I share your hope that he shall return to us soon. Arwen. It was April before he heard more. He was alone, having just bid farewell to the rangers at Fornost when Elladan came upon him among the hills. He took a moment to wonder at that, for the brothers rarely travelled separately, and were always eager to speak with any of the Dunedain they might find. It was as if Elladan had waited, as if he had made sure that they would speak alone. He did not want to think of why that might be. He did not want to think why Elladan was approaching slowly, leading his horse, as if afraid to disturb Halbarad. He did not hail the son of Elrond, but only waited, as still as if he had grown roots. Later, he tried to recall whether Elladan had said anything to him. It had slipped from his mind, if he had, but he knew that he took the bundle from behind his saddle, handling it gently, almost cautiously, as if it was either very precious or very dangerous. He set it to the ground before Halbarad, glanced up, and then began to untie the cord that held the cloth in place. It took Halbarad a moment to parse the jumble of broken wood and wire, and he felt a strange urge to laugh at the sight. He covered his mouth with one hand and stared, eyes slowly finding their way through the ruin before him, the carved wood, the 8-petaled bloodroot flowers on the soundboard, the birds, the stars. He had seen it too many times to mistake it, had fallen asleep to its sweet whisper, had heard it thrum and sigh whenever Maklar had set down his pack. He knew wooden serpent that wound around the pillar, the silver pins that Maklar's long fingers tuned with such confident precision. He knew the sound that it would make when the air stirred around it, and, ruined though it was, he didn't quite understand how it was so silent now. We found it on the shores of the Entwash, where it flows down from the mountains, Elladan was saying, but the words meant little to Halbarad. We think now that Saruman spoke truly, and Maklar did not reach Isengard. Halbarad knelt with him and reached forth to touch the carcass of the harp. His hand shook as he did so, and he entertained the mad thought that it would prove to be an illusion only. That if he only did not touch the thing before him, then it would still be possible for things to go back to the way they had been before. The wood was smooth, almost warm beneath his fingertips, masterfully carved, but worn soft through much use and care. He gasped. He could not breathe, like something vital had been carved out of his chest, leaving behind a cold hole for the wind to whistle through. He wanted to howl with it, to cry out, to hold the shards of wood in his hands until he bled, screaming until someone gave him back the song that had been silenced. His shoulders shook with the weight of it, and he was grateful that Elladan had taken such care to find him alone. I don't pretend to understand what he was to you, Halbarad, but I grieve for your loss, said Elladan, grasping his shoulder. Was there nothing else? Halbarad asked, when he could speak again. Nothing. We think it may have traveled some distance in the river. Look, see how the wood is warped? It was wet for some time, he sighed. We searched the area as well as we could, but we found nothing. No sign of fighting, no more of his possessions, no other remains. Then he may yet live, said Halbarad, his head light with a sharp radiance of sudden hope. Elladan's voice was cautious, worried, the way one might speak to someone in the grips of delusion. It is not impossible. But do you not think so? Halbarad, Maklar has borne that harp, and no other since he and his brothers stole the swan ships and came to Middle-earth ere the sun's first rising. Can you think of something that would separate it from him now? You do not know him. I do not, Elladan agreed. Halbarad, you know who he is, and you believe that he would not leave you without a word. He would not. He loves me. And yet Halbarad could not say it. For Elladan was correct. Halbarad could not think of anything that would prevent Maklar from reaching him if he wished to do so, and despite the warnings, some veiled, some shouted, he believed that Maklar had intended to return. There was a harp, ancient but ruined, a song, silenced, a traveler who had not reached his destination. Truths, all, and they were there whether Halbarad wished to believe them or not. And there was this too. If he believed that Maklar loved him, Halbarad could not also believe that he lived. He loved me, Halbarad whispered. Elladan stayed with him for the rest of that day, and Halbarad was grateful for it, for the grief was an ocean that might have swallowed him had he been alone. He could not spend longer than that sobbing upon his friend's shoulder, though, for the wicked things that still haunted the northern wilds seemed to have waited for this moment to again descend from the hills and the moors to harry the rangers. It would have served no purpose, he knew it, but he longed to leave, to fly south, to follow the path his blackbird had taken, to seek something that would prove him that there was nothing to wait for, no miraculous returning, but he could not. Aragorn still had not returned, and Halbarad had been given a task. Halbarad slept poorly, and he did not dream. He kept the heart with him, its shards bundled up beneath his head at night, as if there was still a song somewhere within, as if, could he only dream again, he'd find himself again riding into battle, a song on his lips, a flame at his side. Wanting, though, had never yet changed what was, and so the seasons passed, without dreams and without songs. End of chapter 13. Stay tuned.